Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on economics. Seriously. We're going to transform it from this, complicated science into a practical, hands-on toolkit that you can actually use for your everyday choices. So, let's jump right in.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the one single problem that kicks off all of economics. Then from there, we'll build a simple three-part checklist for making way smarter choices. After that, we'll get into the two massive forces that shape every market, that's buyers and sellers, before we wrap it all up with your brand new economic mindset. All right, first up, the problem of scarcity. Have you ever had that feeling where you just can't have everything you want? Of course you have. Well, it turns out that one simple, universal feeling is the real starting point for this entire field. At its absolute core, economics is all about this one basic conflict. We as humans have endless wants, but we live in a world with limited stuff. Limited time, limited money, limited resources. And because of that scarcity, we are forced to choose. Every single choice, big or small, means we have to make a trade-off. And this leads us to one of the biggest trade-offs a whole society has to deal with. Just think of the entire economy as a giant pie. Efficiency is all about making that pie as big as we possibly can. Equity, on the other hand, is about how we slice that pie up and share it. The really tricky part is, sometimes the things you do to slice the pie more fairly can actually cause the whole pie to shrink. It's this constant, delicate balancing act. So, if we're always being forced to choose, how can we make smarter choices? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into next. It's time to build your new mental toolkit for making great decisions. I want you to think of these three powerful ideas as your own personal actionable checklist. It doesn't matter if you're making a huge business decision or just figuring out what to do on a Saturday. If you run your choice through this checklist, you're almost guaranteed to get a more rational, better outcome. Okay, first on our checklist is opportunity cost. And honestly, this quote says it all. The real cost of anything isn't just the money you hand over. Nope. It's the value of the next best thing you had to give up to get it. It's the price of the road not taken. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a handyman named Ramesh. He's got two options. Option one, he can open his own shop, which he figures will make him about $20,000 in profit. Seems pretty good, right? But hold on, what's he giving up? Well, option two is to just sell his inventory for $10,000 and go back to his old job where he'd earn $15,000. Add those up, that's a total gain of $25,000. See? By thinking about the opportunity cost, that income he'd miss out on, the smarter choice just becomes crystal clear. All right, tool number 2 on our checklist is understanding sunk costs. Think of these as spilt milk. They're costs that are gone forever. You've already paid them, and there's no way to get them back. The absolute key, the trick to smart decisions, is to learn to completely ignore them when you're thinking about the future. Let's make this super real. You paid 500 rupees for a movie ticket, and 30 minutes in, you realize this movie is terrible. Do you stay? A lot of us would, right? We fall into the sunk cost trap. But an economist knows that the 500 rupees is gone, whether you stay or you leave. The real decision is about your next 2 hours. Do you waste them on a bad film, or do you cut your losses and do something better? An economist always walks out. And the final tool for our checklist is something called the marginal principle. Now, I know it sounds a little academic, but it's actually incredibly simple. It just means you should make decisions by looking only at the cost and the benefit of the very next step. That's it. Keep doing something as long as that extra benefit is bigger than the extra cost. The second that flips, it's time to stop. Okay, so now that we have our decision-making toolkit, let's zoom out a little bit. It's time to see how all of our individual choices as buyers come together to create one of the most powerful forces in the entire economy, demand. So quantity demanded, in plain English, is just how much of something people are willing and able to buy at a specific price. And this leads us to the super important law of demand, which basically says, if nothing else changes, when the price of something goes up, people want to buy less of it. Simple, right? Now listen up, because this is a really crucial distinction to get right. Let's say the price of mangoes drops. Well, people buy more, right? That's just a movement along the demand curve that was already there. But what if something else changes? Like, say you get a big promotion at work. Now your entire demand curve might shift to the right. That means you'd want to buy more mangoes at every possible price. So what kind of things cause these big shifts? Well, it could be a change in your income, just like we said. Or maybe a change in the price of related stuff. If the price of coffee goes through the roof, the demand for tea might go up. It could just be that tastes and preferences change, or even your expectations about the future. Like if you hear a big sale is coming next week. All of these things can shift the entire demand for a product. But of course, buyers are only half of the story. To really understand how a market works, we have to look at its mirror image, the sellers. And that brings us to the whole concept of supply. Quantity supplied is pretty much what it sounds like. It's the amount of something that sellers want to sell at a particular price. And the law of supply is basically the opposite of the law of demand. When the price of something goes up, sellers are willing to supply more of it. Why? Well, because it's more profitable for them. And guess what? The exact same logic of movement versus shift applies here too. If a product's price changes, that just causes a movement along the existing supply curve. But if any other factor changes, like say the cost of their raw materials goes up, that will shift the entire curve. The major things that shift supply are usually tied to a seller's costs or their ability to produce. For example, if the price of flour gets more expensive, a baker is going to supply less bread at every price. But if their technology gets better, let's say they invent a much faster oven, well, now that bakery can supply more. And of course, the total number of sellers in the market makes a huge difference too. Okay, let's bring this all home. We started with that fundamental problem of scarcity, we built a toolkit for making smarter, more rational choices, and then we explored how all those choices come together to create the market forces of supply and demand. So what does this all really mean for you? It means you're now equipped with a completely new way of looking at the world, for real. You can now spot the hidden opportunity costs in your choices, you know to tell your brain to ignore sunk costs, you can think on the margin to fine-tune your decisions, and you actually get the basic mechanics that make any market tick. And that leaves us with just one last question to think about. Now that you can see all these hidden costs, these invisible benefits and trade-offs behind every single choice, from buying a cup of coffee to making a huge career move, what's one decision you're going to make differently starting today?